Hello Year 10 and welcome to your second lesson on energy. The first part of the double here, we're looking at the distribution of resources around the world. But before we do that, let's recap the last lesson and these 5 main key terms. Simply jot them down with a definition from memory. You've got 5 minutes at most to do that. Pause the video now and get on with it. Okay, here's the answers. So a resource is a supply of something that has a value or a purpose. Quality of life means the general well-being of individuals and societies. Standard of living means is based primarily on income and what that level of income will allow a person to buy in the way of necessities and luxury goods. Economic well-being is a person or family's standard of living based on how well they're doing financially. It's very much based on money again. And social well-being, well, it's about more than money, the access to items which improve the quality of life. So double check that you've got those correct. If you've made any errors, do please correct them now. 2 minutes to do that. Pause the video. So write the title, please. Are there global inequalities in the supply and consumption of resources? So we're looking at, like I said, the distribution, where in the world we find these. And I think the answer to that question is fairly obvious, probably from the first lesson especially. Yes, there are, of course there are. And we're going to look at some reasons why, where in the world they are and are not found. So we're going to be looking at some maps today, as well as some other information. So read the objectives, copy the title, make sure you have the equipment ready, all available, the textbook scan and the maps worksheet on class charts. Pause the video and get that sorted, please. Okay, so some key terms. First of all, we talk about the supply of a resource, meaning the amount of it and where it comes from. So, as you can see from the photos, some fairly simple way of looking at it. On the left, we have a low supply of apples, we've got 1, and on the right, we've got a high supply, we've got 6. Obviously, we're talking about in the real world much larger numbers than that, but you get the idea, hopefully. So copy that down, and if you feel you need to, you could always add the diagram as well. Pause the video to do that. Okay, next key term, consumption, the use of a resource. I'm sure you've heard of the word to consume before, and you've probably thought about eating. That's the most common use of the word consume, meaning to eat. And in that case, you are using the resource of food. However, we still consume water, we consume energy. Any resource that we use and use up as we do so is known as consumption. So when we talk about food, water, and energy, we will be talking about its supply, where it comes from, and its consumption, where it is actually used. So jot that down, and if you want to draw a little diagram to go with it, please do. Pause now. And then we have the term undernutrition. Obviously, this is linked to food specifically, and it's about not eating enough, specifically calories and proteins, to be healthy. Copy that down and put a diagram with it if you so wish. Pause the video now. Okay, so as I said earlier, there are 3 maps in class charts, a PDF of 3 maps. You need to open that up now if you haven't already. Hopefully you have, to save some time. And you've got 3 questions here to complete. First of all, you're describing the pattern of supply and or consumption, depending what it shows, for each of those resources. So you're going to describe each map. There are 3 maps, so we should have 3 separate paragraphs describing them. Remember, when we're looking for patterns, we've come across patterns before. For example, tropical rainforests, the pattern of their location is they're generally located between the tropics, around the equator, at that latitude. That's a pattern. You could describe the pattern of climate across the Earth, that it gets colder the further away from the equator you get. The higher your latitude, the colder it is. There's another pattern. You could look at Europe and say that Western Europe is a wealthier part of Europe than Eastern Europe. And if we had maps showing temperature, showing location of rainforests, showing wealth in Europe, those are the patterns we'd identify. That's what I mean by a pattern, and you're going to do the same with these. Question 2. Use your own knowledge to bullet point explanations as to why these patterns may occur, and use pages 256 and 257. So read through the textbook pages. This will probably take you a little time to go through those, and you're going to start bullet pointing why you think those patterns will occur. And finally, explain how physical geography affects the usage or the consumption of each resource. There's a challenge at the bottom there as well to complete if you have time, although there's quite a lot to be doing there if you're doing it thoroughly in 20 minutes. Get started now. Don't forget, you need those maps as well as these questions. pause the video now. Okay, so here are the answers to the first question, one for each of the 3 maps. You'll notice a general pattern of me looking for highest and lowest, looking for latitude. Is there a link between the equator and how far away you are? Well, actually, yes, for most of them. There's also a link in wealth as well. If you actually look at the countries and think about it, there's usually a link between how wealthy the country is and whatever it is the map is showing. So anyway, have a read through these. You can take ideas from these to add to yours if you want, or by all means, just copy them straight out if you think you need to. So spend 5 minutes or so doing that, and then we'll look at the next questions. Before we move on to the next 2 questions, could you copy this sentence down? I just think this sums up nicely what we've just found out from all those maps. So leave a line. This is the kind of key information that you might want to highlight to really make pop out and stand out in your book. And finally, here are the last 2 answers for questions 2 and 3. Once again, give it a read through, add anything you need to. By all means, copy them out if you feel like your answer is significantly different. Spend 3-5 minutes or so on that, and we are nearly there. Okay, one final task for today. I'd like you to complete both of these, both tasks involving what we call metacognition, the idea of thinking about how your brain works, and especially with the second question, I like this one a lot. What are you likely to forget from this lesson first? The more you practice that skill, the better you get. It's quite tough to think about that, but the more you understand how your brain works, research does actually show the more likely you are to remember and recall and know stuff. So it's a good task to do. And this is something that you could by all means email to your teacher. It'd be very interesting, especially like I said for number 2, to see what you come up with. So spend 5 to 10 minutes on that. And that's the end of this lesson. So take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Goodbye.